Welcome you into the Jack and Jenny Wilborn Media Room here in Valley Football Center. Brenden Slaughter, publisher of BeaversEdge.com, joined by Beavers Edge senior writer Ryan Harlan. We're coming to you guys following day one of Oregon State spring practice. We're coming to you guys from inside as we dealt with quite a bit of elements today, and the Oregon State staffers were nice enough to let us film our video inside.
I know, it was great.
You and I are thrilled, and we're pleased to be talking to you guys everything we saw day one. For everything from Ryan and I, make sure to head on over to BeaversEdge.com as we're going to have rotations, first to second team, things we saw on day one. Obviously, Beavers still getting into the mix, but some good details for our premium subscribers over at Beavers Edge, so go check that out. We got a 30-day free trial if you haven't joined yet. But Ryan, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about today. Obviously, the big news, Malik Murphy on campus. We're seeing, the new coaches in place, seeing some new players in place. As we talked about, 11 new transfers plus a bunch of early enrollees. So a lot of new faces just out there today, some returnees as well, as we mentioned. And just to kind of grade it compared to like last year, that was one of the things that was being discussed here in postgame. It felt like it was more focused and business-like today, as far as a real lunch pail, hard hat, get to work kind of a thing, rather than kind of feeling things out like we saw a year ago with kind of that first spring under Bray.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of that kind of lunch pail kind of attitude, going to work, putting the head down, a lot of grit, a lot of, kind of sneaky athleticism out there on the field a little bit too from Trent Walker and a few other guys. But no, I had to make some reference to that a little bit. But really, in all seriousness aside, my jokes aside from that, it really felt like this was like observing a practice throughout the course of a week, throughout a season. Like, it didn't feel like you're putting the pieces together of a new puzzle, or in previous years where it's like, okay, you have a bunch of new guys coming in, like you're learning a new system, you're doing this, especially from last year too, where a bunch of new guys, you're learning a brand new system relatively on both sides of the ball. This time around, as Hank mentioned earlier, it was there was a lot more guys that knew the playbook and what they were doing, what their responsibilities were. Jabari even said too, the biggest point of emphasis for him in the offseason was learning the playbook and learning what's expected of him on each and every play that's being called by Gundy. So a lot of attention to detail was the best way I can describe what the players were doing on practice that first day.
Yeah, no, and as we mentioned too, just lots of new things. Several, not even several, many new coaches. As Oregon State had to replace quite a few coaches this offseason. We got to see them, into the mix today. Didn't hear Cav's big booming voice today, but got a chance to see Pat McCann, coaching real close with the receivers. Obviously, we got a chance to see Trent Bray, working with the defense, and seeing, Rob Akey taking on more of the head coaching roles. And Bray kind of talked about that, so check that out in our post-practice video breakdown. But for the most part, Ryan, I think the thing I was most impressed with today, and I'll encourage everyone to go watch it, was just talking to Malik Murphy. And it was so much like talking to DJU 2 years ago, where he just has an aura, and you're just like, not to throw shade previous, but this is a big time quarterback. Mm-hmm. And did you get that same kind of mentality talking to him? And obviously 6 foot something, and 230. I mean, he is a big dude, and kind of just, and you can see it. He just looks like a D1 quarterback, and reminded me a lot of DJU, just in the just how physically big he is.
Oh no, definitely did, especially to the presence that Malik had talking to everybody in the media. Like, it gave me reminders of how DJU would speak to us and talk to us. And I also went after he was done talking, introduced myself to him, because he's a guy that you want to be around, and that's the kind of confidence that a quarterback has, and especially in a new environment too, where you got to have that confidence, that swagger. You're the leader of this team, you're the CEO of this team. People are gonna look at you in those tough moments, in those big games, and you can build those relationships over the course of the offseason. You're in a good spot to have success come time to put on the pads first week of the season.
Yeah, I mean, a couple other things too. And again, for a full report, make sure to head over to BeaversEdge.com. And again, we'll have a full breakdown today. You could tell, with the offensive line, only bringing back Van Wells, and Van Wells is kind of on a bit of a more of a veteran workload. This we didn't see a whole lot of him. So essentially, in that respect, 5 new guys on the offensive line. Some other guys will be moving in and out. And Trent Bray wasn't too specific with us when we asked him about injuries, but there are some guys who I'm sure will be taking it light. For example, Right guard Tyler Volton obviously had a season-ending injury last year. We'll be curious to see where his status is. So a lot more still to determine in the days yet to come. Today was a monsoon out there, so we were doing our best to grab what information we could. But definitely make sure to stay locked into BeaversEdge.com. Me and Ryan, as we'll continue to bring you guys coverage of each of the practices. But just after day one, Ryan, what would you say is kind of your biggest takeaway from today?
Biggest takeaway, I think the energy of practice was a big one. Hank mentioned that post game too. Is hey, the coaches were telling us to put the brake on a little bit, ease up on the level of intensity, which is shocking to hear for first practice.
Yeah.
Usually you kind of hear oh yeah, we're getting the swing of things, but that was definitely something that I noticed from today. And then two, I think I'm just excited to see what the new coaches do on staff and how their roles expand as we get more and more into spring football, and then eventually into fall camp.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what Malik Murphy can do with Oregon State's weapons at receiver. We talked about it leading up. One of our burning questions at Beaver's Edge and depth chart wise and everything else was talking about who would kind of emerge as that number 2 receiver consistently behind Trent Walker. We all know what Sauce Walker can do. And especially, I think, with more better quarterback production this year, I think his numbers will go up. But Malik Murphy, super complimentary of Darius Clemens, mentioned big reason why he came, mentioned he tried to get him to commit to Texas when he was enrolled at Texas. So I love to see that those guys have a relationship, and I think that could be really good to see, Malik's hey, I think he can be really good. So that's exciting for who could kind of develop behind Trent there. So I'm excited to see what the receivers, tight ends, the pass catchers in general are able to do these next couple practices, because that's an area that needed to improve. I mean, you go back last year, there were good moments with the running game, especially before Jam Griffin got hurt. I don't know if there's ever a time you can say the passing game was good last year. So it's, maybe passable at times, but that's what I want to see is, can Oregon State develop? We know they can run the ball. We know they, will get a group of offensive linemen. They will find a way to run the ball successfully. Can they build that passing game?
Exactly. And two, on Darius, we saw at the end of this past season, what he was able to do. And if he can build upon that with Malik, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up with that number 2 role before we head into fall camp here.
Absolutely. So lots of things there. Tight ends, too, we're going to be able to keep an eye on, too, and see as that goes. Offensive line rebuilding. Defensive line looks to be a little ahead of the offensive line, which is a great sign. We'll be kind of breaking into what we saw today. Nice fumble recovery from a player as well. And then linebackers and secondary as well. So lots of stuff we're going to be diving into here. Make sure to stay locked to BeaversEdge.com. Appreciate Ryan Harlan for joining me on this post-practice breakdown. We'll be back later in the week as Oregon State spring football continues. Keep it locked to BeaversEdge.com.